Some queens are born into thrones. Others marry into them. Walk quietly beside them. Watch them fall apart. And then, when no one is looking, they sit down on the ruins and build something stronger. This is the story of Catherine, the girl with no crown, no heirs, no reason to survive. But she did, and Russia would never be the same. You're listening to Silent Sleepless Historian. Tonight, we remember the empress who conquered without a war. If you're here to unwind, you're exactly where you need to be. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a letter, an invitation. The 18th century, equivalent of a message on LinkedIn, for a job you are wildly underqualified for, but which could change your life forever. The recipient is a 14-year-old girl named Sophie, Princess Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst, to be precise. And if you've never heard of Anhalt-Zerbst, don't worry, you're not alone. It was one of those tiny, politically irrelevant German principalities that were basically just a collection of castles with a flag. Sophie's father was a prince, but the kind of prince whose main job was managing a budget that was perpetually screaming for help. Their life wasn't one of poverty, but it was a life of meticulous, boring, penny-pinching aristocracy. A child with too many names and not enough food in winter. Her family was noble, technically, but titles don't pay the baker. Then the letter arrives from Russia, from the Empress Elizabeth, a woman who ruled an empire that could swallow Germany whole without even burping. The invitation was simple: pack your bags, bring your mother, and come to St. Petersburg. The unspoken part of the invitation was, of course, the real reason, to be auditioned as a potential wife for the heir to the Russian throne, the Empress's nephew, Peter. This was it. This was the lottery ticket. For Sophie's mother, it was a dream come true. For Sophie, it was the beginning of a journey that would demand everything from her. She traveled in winter, the snow biting at her heels, the sky gray as unwashed linen. The trip itself was brutal. We're talking a multi-week road trip across northern Europe in the dead of winter, in a carriage that probably had the suspension of a shopping cart. The cold wasn't just a temperature. It was a physical presence, a kind of bully that laughed at your fancy German coat and seeped right into your bones. But for Sophie, this wasn't a hardship. It was an investment. Every freezing mile was a step away from obscurity, and a step towards a destiny she was only just beginning to imagine. Imagine the bitter wind against her face as the carriage creaks through endless forests, each breath visible in the frozen air, each mile taking her further from everything familiar and closer to an uncertain future. When she finally arrived in Russia, it was like stepping onto another planet, a planet made of gold leaf, frost, and secrets. The Russian court wasn't just rich. It was aggressively, theatrically rich. The sheer scale of it was designed to intimidate, to make you feel small. Nobles wore fortunes and jewels just to attend a Tuesday night dinner. The air was thick with the smells of incense, expensive perfume, and simmering political plots. The court in St. Petersburg was colder than the roads, not in temperature, but in tone. And at the center of this glittering spiderweb was the Empress Elizabeth. She was a force of nature huge, loud, deeply religious, and terrifyingly powerful. She had a wardrobe of thousands of dresses and a temper to match. Getting her approval was the only thing that mattered. Then there was Peter, the intended husband. And, oh boy, Peter was a piece of work. He was a gangly, awkward teenager who was, to put it mildly, not ready for prime time. While Sophie was already thinking about politics and power, Peter's main interests were playing with his toy soldiers, an army of them, which he would meticulously drill and even hold court-martials for in drinking. He was obsessed with his homeland of Prussia, hated Russia, and had all the diplomatic grace of a slammed door. He liked to play war in the dining hall, with real gunpowder and guests. This was the situation Sophie walked into. An intimidating boss, a bizarre and disappointing future husband, and a court full of people who saw her as nothing more than a foreign girl, a pawn. If you're enjoying this journey through history's shadows, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Silent Sleepless Historian. Your support helps our community grow and ensures you never miss a story. Leave a comment sharing where you're listening from tonight. I love knowing which corners of the world these tales have reached. And if you're here to drift into sleep, know that we're just beginning. The story of Catherine has only just opened its first chapter. Rest easy and let history's whispers guide you toward dreams. Catherine had survived the first test. She had transformed herself from Sophie to Catherine, from German princess to Russian Grand Duchess. But having a title is one thing. Having power is another entirely. And the path between the two is rarely a straight line. As we continue our journey with Catherine, remember that empires aren't just built with armies. Sometimes they're built with whispers, with patience, and with the quiet determination of those history never expected to rule. Some marriages are built on love, others on convenience. Catherine's was built on survival. She had the name, the title, the position, but a title without power is just a word on parchment. And Catherine wanted more than words. All right, so Catherine has landed the job. She's officially the Grand Duchess. She's survived the interview from hell. The problem is, now she has to actually work with her new co-worker, her husband, Peter. And their marriage was, to put it mildly, a dumpster fire. Their marriage remained unconsummated for years. Night after night, Catherine waited. The palace whispered. The court watched. The empress grew impatient. Some historians believe Peter was physically unable. Others suggest he was simply uninterested in his wife. Whatever the reason, the imperial bed remained cold. For Catherine, this wasn't just a personal humiliation. It was an existential threat. Without an heir, her position was fragile. A barren marriage could be dissolved. She could be sent home in disgrace. So she did what survivors do. She adapted. She found other ways to secure her future. Imagine the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders each night. The silent judgment in the eyes of courtiers who knew too much. The whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Peter wasn't just a bad husband. He was a strange one. He was still obsessed with his toy soldiers. We're talking thousands of them. He would spend hours marching them around, arranging them in battle formations. This is a grown man, the heir to an empire, mind you. The most famous story is that he once held a full military court-martial for a rat. He claimed the rat had committed treason by chewing the head off one of his favorite soldiers, which was made of starch. He found the rat guilty and had it publicly executed by hanging. This was the man Catherine was married to. While Peter was busy executing rodents, Catherine was playing a completely different game. She knew the marriage was a dead end. She knew her husband was a liability. So she started building her own power base, quietly, patiently. She read voraciously. She devoured books on philosophy, law, and history. She was basically giving herself the Ivy League education the future emperor refused to get. She wrote letters to people like Voltaire, the biggest intellectual celebrity in Europe, building her brand. And most importantly, she made friends. Powerful friends. If you're finding your eyelids growing heavy, let them. The story continues even as you drift. The palace walls have witnessed countless secrets. They can hold yours too. Specifically, she became very close with the Orlov brothers. 5 of them. All popular, ambitious, and influential officers in the imperial guard. The most prominent was Gregory Orlov. He was handsome, charismatic, brave, the exact opposite of her husband. He became her lover, her favorite. But this wasn't just a secret romance. This was a strategic alliance. Through Gregory, Catherine gained the loyalty of the most powerful regiments in the capital. She had the brains. They had the muscle. A perfect combination. The scandal wasn't that she took a lover. Everyone at court had lovers. The scandal was how boldly she chose, how strategically she loved. She eventually bore a son, Paul, the official heir to the throne. The palace whispered about his true parentage. But Catherine knew what mattered. She had secured her position. She had given Russia its future. And then the inevitable happens. In the winter of 1762, Empress Elizabeth dies. Peter becomes Tsar Peter III, and he immediately starts speedrunning how to make every powerful person in the empire hate him. He pulls Russia out of a war they were winning against his hero, the King of Prussia. He tries to make the army wear ugly Prussian-style uniforms, which they hated. He messed with the church's land and traditions. In 6 months, he alienated the military, the church, and the nobility. The big three. He was a PR disaster, and Catherine knew his days were numbered. The question was, would her days be numbered too? The end came suddenly. Peter threatened to divorce Catherine, arrest her, and marry his mistress. That was the final straw. The Orlovs knew they had to act. Midnight, July 1762. A knock on Catherine's door. It's Alexei Orlov, Gregory's brother, breathless from a hard ride. He says one thing, it's time to get up. Everything is ready for you to be proclaimed. Picture the stillness of that moment, the weight of decision, the path that splits in two, one leading to power, the other to ruin. No hesitation. Catherine gets dressed, not in a gown, but in the green uniform of an officer of the Preobrazhensky Guard. She rides into St. Petersburg as the sun rises. The guards see her, this German woman in their uniform, and they roar. They swear allegiance on the spot. The church blesses her. The government officials recognize her. By 9 a.m., it was basically over, without a single shot fired. And what about Peter? He heard the news, panicked, and tried to flee. He was captured without a fight. He just folded. He wrote a pathetic letter abdicating the throne, asking only for his mistress, his violin, and his favorite dog. Catherine had him sent to a country estate to think about what he'd done. A few days later, news arrived. Peter was dead. The official cause was a severe colic attack. The unofficial cause was a drunken brawl with his guards led by Alexei Orlov that ended in a permanent solution. Alexei wrote a frantic, panicked letter to Catherine, confessing, "We have done a foolish thing. He is no more." Did she order it? History doesn't say. Did she expect it? Perhaps. Did she mourn him? Not a single tear was recorded. Catherine had stolen an empire. She had arrived as a pawn, and now she was the queen. Picture this. Catherine, now Empress of Russia. The throne is hers. The power is hers. But power, once gained, must be maintained. And Catherine knew something most rulers forget. No one rules alone. The morning after Peter's convenient death, Catherine woke to a new reality. She was empress of the largest country on earth, a country with problems as vast as its borders. Imagine the weight of that first morning, the silence of her chambers, broken only by the whispers of servants, the knowledge that millions now lived or died by her decisions, the understanding that many still saw her as a usurper, a German, a woman, a widow under suspicious circumstances. Most new leaders surround themselves with friends. Catherine surrounded herself with talent. Her first challenge was simple but essential. She needed to reward the people who had helped her seize power. The Orlov brothers expected to be paid. The guards who had proclaimed her expected bonuses. The nobles who had supported her expected positions. But Catherine was playing a longer game. She didn't just want to reward loyalty. She wanted to build a system. Gregory Orlov, her lover and co-conspirator, expected to be named co-ruler, perhaps even her husband. He had, after all, helped her take an empire. Surely that deserved something more than a thank you note. Catherine smiled. She thanked him for his service. She gave him lands, titles, money, but not marriage, not co-rule, not a single fragment of her hard-won power. The night air in the palace grew colder between them. Their conversations, once intimate, became formal. Their passion, once blazing, dimmed to embers. Catherine was building something new, a system where talent mattered more than bloodlines, where loyalty was rewarded, but competence was essential, where even her lovers served a purpose beyond the bedroom. And speaking of lovers, Catherine would become famous for them. History remembers her as much for her bed as for her throne. But this wasn't mere appetite. It was strategy. Each of her favorites, as her lovers were officially known, served a purpose. They were handpicked not just for their physical attributes, though Catherine certainly had an eye for male beauty, but for what they brought to her reign. Gregory Orlov was strong, connected to the military. He helped her secure power. Stanislaw Poniatowski was cultured, sophisticated. He connected her to European intellectual circles. Alexander Vasilchikov was young, malleable, a placeholder when she needed time to think. Gregory Potemkin was brilliant, visionary. He would help her reshape the empire. The whispers at court called her insatiable. The pamphlets in Europe mocked her appetites. But Catherine knew something her critics didn't. In a world where women had few paths to power, she had found a way to build a loyal cabinet, bound to her by the most intimate of ties. The rhythm of her relationships followed a pattern. A new young man would catch her eye. He would be tested not just for physical compatibility, but for intelligence, discretion, potential usefulness. If he passed, he would be installed in special apartments, directly below or adjacent to the Empress's own. A private staircase often connected them. Convenience was important for an empress with a busy schedule. He would receive gifts, lands, titles, jewels, sometimes even people serfs by the thousands. The price of imperial affection was generous. But there were rules. Absolute discretion. No interference in state affairs unless invited. No jealousy when the time came, as it always did for replacement. When a favorite fell from grace, he didn't fall far. Unlike other courts, where former favorites might lose their heads, Catherine's ex-lovers usually kept their wealth, their positions, their lives. They simply lost access to that private staircase. This wasn't kindness. It was calculation. A fallen favorite who keeps his head has no reason to plot revenge. A wealthy ex-lover has every reason to remain loyal. And so Catherine built around herself a circle of men, all of whom had loved her, most of whom still served her, none of whom threatened her. It was, perhaps, the most effective human resources department in history. But of all her favorites, one stood apart. Gregory Potemkin, the one-eyed giant. He was unlike the others from the start. Not just a handsome face, but a brilliant mind. Not just a lover, but a partner. Their letters to each other reveal a relationship, unlike any other in Catherine's life. Passionate, certainly, but also intellectual, playful, equal. My dearest friend, she called him, even years after their physical relationship had ended. My golden tiger, my lion. He called her Matushka, little mother. a term of endearment that acknowledged both her position and their unusual bond. Some historians believe they secretly married. Others think their relationship transcended such conventional arrangements. What's clear is that even after they were no longer lovers, they remained partners in ruling the empire. Potemkin became her viceroy in the south, her general, her visionary, the man who would help her expand Russia's borders and reimagine what the empire could be. Together, they dreamed of reclaiming Constantinople, of rebuilding the Byzantine Empire with a Russian empress on its throne, of a southern empire of warm waters and ancient cities. It was Potemkin who gave shape to Catherine's ambitions, who built new cities on the steppes, who integrated new territories into the empire, who created the Black Sea Fleet that would project Russian power into waters long dominated by the Ottoman Turks. Their partnership reshaped the map of Europe, and when other favorites came and went through that private staircase, Potemkin often helped select them. He understood Catherine's needs, physical, emotional, political. He remained her confidant, her advisor, her friend. This was Catherine's genius. She built a system where personal relationships served state purposes, where intimacy was a political tool, where even love could be harnessed to imperial ambitions. The court watched. Europe watched. They saw a woman with appetites. They missed the architect at work. Catherine was building an empire, brick by brick, and some of those bricks were the men who shared her bed. But beyond her favorites, Catherine assembled a government of talented administrators, regardless of their origins. She promoted people based on ability, not just birth. She sought out intelligence, education, vision. She rewarded results. In an age of rigid hierarchies, this was revolutionary. A German princess ruling a Russian empire, with a Greek dream and a meritocratic vision. Catherine knew that her power, ultimately, rested on perception, on the belief that she was not just legitimate, but exceptional, not just a ruler, but a visionary. So she crafted her image with the same care. She crafted her government. She rose early, worked late. She answered letters personally. She studied reports meticulously. She wrote her own manifestos and declarations. She wanted Russia and Europe to see a monarch who earned her throne through sheer capability, who justified her unusual path to power through the wisdom with which she wielded it. And as the years passed, as her reign extended, as Russia grew stronger, wealthier, more respected, that perception took root. Catherine was no longer the usurper. She was Catherine the Great, the woman who had transformed herself from a minor German princess to one of the most powerful rulers on earth, the woman who had built around herself not just a court, not just a government, but a system designed to amplify her vision, a system where even love served the state, where passion had purpose, where the personal was always, ultimately, political. This was Catherine's true genius, not just that she took power, but that she built a machine to keep it, a machine powered by human connection, the ultimate HR department. And as the empire expanded, as new territories were conquered, as new peoples came under Russian rule, Catherine's system grew with it, adapting, evolving, enduring. In one letter, she famously wrote, "I am neither a warrior queen nor a persecutor. I do not wish to extend my dominions by a single acre, if it must cost a drop of human blood." This from a woman who had expanded Russia's territory by thousands of square miles, through multiple wars, who had crushed rebellions with ruthless efficiency, who had participated in the partition of Poland. But the image stuck. Catherine the Enlightened, Catherine the Philosophical. She played a similar game with Diderot, the French philosopher, an editor of the Encyclopedia, the Enlightenment's greatest intellectual project. She invited him to St. Petersburg, gave him a fortune for his library, spent hours in private conversation with him. When he proposed radical reforms ideas about democracy, equality, freedom, she listened attentively. She engaged thoughtfully. She did almost none of what he suggested, but she kept him as a friend and advocate. She understood that his approval was worth more than his advice. Here's a little-known fact. Catherine wrote anonymous theater reviews in Russian newspapers. She would attend performances and publish critiques under various pseudonyms. This wasn't just a hobby. It was a way to shape cultural discourse, to establish herself as not just a political authority, but a cultural one as well. She also wrote plays herself, comedies mostly, often satirizing the very nobles who served her. Imagine being a Russian aristocrat, attending a play written by your empress, laughing nervously as you recognize your own foibles, being mocked on stage. Power doesn't get more personal than that. Perhaps her most scandalous PR move was her art collection. Catherine bought art at a scale never before seen. Entire collections, thousands of works. She built the Hermitage to house them. But she didn't just collect beautiful things. She collected strategic things. When the opportunity arose to purchase a collection, that had been intended for Catherine's rival, Frederick the Great of Prussia. She swooped in and bought it at an astronomical price. It wasn't just about the art. It was about denying it to Frederick, about demonstrating that Russia, not Prussia, was the new cultural powerhouse of the North. Art wasn't decoration. It was diplomacy. She also understood the power of scandal in building a memorable personal brand. The rumors about her sexual appetites, the whispers about her collection of erotic furniture, the stories about her private bedroom with its mechanical devices. Catherine never confirmed them, but she never forcefully denied them either. She understood that a certain mystique, a hint of the forbiddens, made her more fascinating, more memorable, more powerful. The truth about Catherine's private life was probably more mundane. She had lovers, certainly, but the more outrageous stories, the ones involving horses, mechanical contraptions, or insatiable appetites, were almost certainly fabrications. Yet they served a purpose. They made Catherine larger than life. They transformed her from a ruler to a legend. And legends are remembered. Catherine also pioneered what we now call medical influencing. She had herself inoculated against smallpox, at a time when the procedure was considered dangerous and experimental. She did it publicly. She documented her experience. She encouraged her subjects to follow her example. It was a public health campaign centuries ahead of its time. A ruler using her own body as a demonstration project for medical progress. She was equally strategic about her image within Russia. For her Russian subjects, she crafted a different persona. Catherine the Orthodox. Catherine the Mother of Russia. She who had been born a German Lutheran became the passionate defender of Russian orthodoxy. She who had no Russian blood became the embodiment of Russian values. She commissioned portraits showing her in traditional Russian dress. She participated in Orthodox rituals with visible devotion. She spoke and wrote Russian fluently. The foreign princess had transformed herself into a symbol of Russian identity. This was perhaps her greatest PR triumph, convincing the Russian people that this German usurper was somehow the authentic voice of Russian destiny. Even her greatest failure became part of her mystique. Catherine dreamed of reclaiming Constantinople, of rebuilding the Byzantine Empire with a Russian ruler on its throne. She even named her second grandson Constantine, a name chosen specifically for this imperial project. She never achieved this goal. The Ottoman Empire proved more resilient than she expected. European politics more complicated. Russian resources more limited. But the dream itself, the sheer ambition of it, became part of her legend. the empress who dreamed on a scale that matched the vastness of her empire. In her later years, Catherine faced a new PR challenge: the French Revolution. This event shook Europe to its core. It challenged the very concept of monarchy. It suggested that kings and queens were not just replaceable, but potentially obsolete. Catherine, who had once corresponded warmly with French philosophers, now condemned their revolutionary heirs. She who had once played the enlightened despot now positioned herself as the defender of traditional order. It was a strategic pivot, a rebranding for a new political reality. She understood that survival sometimes meant abandoning positions that no longer served. That flexibility was not just a virtue, but a necessity. As she aged, Catherine became increasingly concerned with her legacy. She began writing her memoirs. She commissioned histories of her reign. She carefully preserved her correspondence. She was curating how future generations would see her, writing the first draft of her own history. In this, too, she was remarkably successful. When we think of Catherine today, we largely think of her as she wished to be remembered. Catherine the Great, the enlightened empress, the woman who transformed Russia. Not Catherine the usurper, not Catherine the German, not Catherine whose path to power was paved with a convenient death. This was her final and most enduring PR triumph. She controlled not just how her contemporaries saw her, but how history would remember her. In an age before mass media, before instant communication, before image consultants and PR firms, Catherine understood something fundamental. Power is not just what you do. It's what people believe you do. It's not just who you are. It's who people think you are. She was in the very sense, the original influencer. So as the candles burn low in the Winter Palace, we leave Catherine for tonight, still crafting her image, still expanding her empire, still writing her own story. But there is more to tell. More conquests, more lovers, more triumphs and challenges. Those stories will wait for another night, another quiet moment between us. If you've enjoyed drifting through history with me, please subscribe to Silent Sleepless Historian for the continuation of Catherine's remarkable journey. Now, as you rest here in this moment, let your thoughts grow quieter. Let your breathing slow. Let the weight of the day release from your shoulders. History's whispers are fading now, like footsteps down a palace corridor, like the rustle of imperial silks, like the scratch of a quill on parchment. The Empress's world recedes, making space for your dreams to emerge. Perhaps you'll dream of snow-covered steppes, or candlelit palaces, or the quiet determination of a woman who transformed herself from outsider to icon. Or perhaps you'll simply drift into the peaceful darkness, where no empires need building, where no image needs crafting, where no power needs maintaining. Just rest, just peace, just you. Until next time, may your dreams be as grand as an empress's ambitions, and far more peaceful.